start with that. So what VMware wants us to do with this particular in this particular introduction, module 1 and module 2 of the VCP course, is we just do like a general introduction on VMware and ESXi, and then number 2, we do an introduction to software-defined data center, vSphere client, and ESXi host. Now, I read because I'm an official VMware course student, so I paid for like the official VMware training from a certified training provider, and I have the materials, the books, the official books, and I read it. I think it's the VMware certification, same as the Cisco certification. They've all reached a point where they've become legacy, in my opinion. So, for example, what VMware wants us to be talking about in course introduction and introduction to software-defined data center is, what are the benefits of using a virtual infrastructure? What are the benefits of using a virtualized infrastructure versus using just a physical infrastructure? That's like trying to teach, the millennial generation the benefits of using Facebook. They grew up on Facebook, they didn't know anything anything without Facebook. And it's kind of like the same way. We're not talking to people who grew up in the generation past who we're trying to introduce virtualization to. This generation of IT administrators grew up on virtualization. They grew up on VMware, on VirtualBox, on Hyper-V. They've grown up. So starting to like take them on a course now where we're trying to talk to them about here are the benefits of virtualizing your infrastructure, because it allows you to do agile provisioning, because you can provision servers quicker now rather than having to buy physical servers and all that. That's like speaking to the choir. I'm not sure what's your opinion on that, Benji and Abdul. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that it's still beneficial in this day and age to be talking to someone, an IT administrator, about here are the benefits of virtual? I don't know of any organization, I'm sure that they are, that don't use virtualization. I'm not aware of anyone, even like very small firms that I know of, they still use virtual infrastructure, even if it's like on a single host, they still use it. Or what do you think, Benji and Abdul? What's your thought on that? What's your thought around that? Hello, can you hear me? Yep.
I I've only been at one company where I've been in an administrator role
Mhm.
in the past 10 years.
Mhm.
So that's all I know. And the president of my company is only 31.
Mhm.
I'm 41. I'll be 42 soon. So
Yeah.
yeah, I believe he kind of grew up maybe learning that. So he's been using VMware for maybe since version 3.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What about Abdul? Like, what do you think? Do you think that there's any benefits to me now coming and talking to you around, the point around benefit of using virtualized infrastructure versus physical infrastructure? Do you think that gives any benefits to you? Do you think so?
Yeah, for sure. Now virtualization, uh, it's not only in the data center; it's becoming the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Now to the
yeah.
yeah.
So that was what I was thinking of when I was reading the old curriculum, was that this is like Cisco Cisco just like last 2 weeks they just changed their whole CCNA curriculum because they realized this is not up to date anymore. And actually, with all the changes that they've made to the CCNA curriculum, and I read through like all the changes, in my opinion, it's still not fit for purpose. But that's like a separate discussion for another time. But sincerely, in my opinion, the VMware VCP6 official curriculum, in my own opinion, is not fit for purpose anymore. In the day and age that we live on, it was fit for purpose in like VM vSphere 4 days, but not anymore. So I really think it needs a lot of changes and stuff like that. Okay, so we're not going to be talking about all those boring crap that they want us to talk about. we're going to be talking about something much more relevant, or things that are much more relevant. So one of the core things that I think we should focus on are things that not only things that are currently going on, but things that we should start preparing for in this space. So one of the things that we're going to be focusing on, we're going to be talking about something like the hybrid cloud. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the hybrid cloud fundamentals. Actually, let's just put it this way. Let's start from the private public cloud fundamentals, and then we're going to talk about things like the things around hyperconvergence, and this is all around the introduction. We're going to talk about things like hyperconvergence, and then we're going to talk about things like the hybrid cloud. And these are the kind of stuff that we're going to talk about and just look at today. So one of the core things that we'll probably bring up is to bring up that in IT infrastructure today, because let's start with this. In IT infrastructure, VMware vSphere does not stand alone. It doesn't stand in isolation. So we're doing the VMware vSphere course, but it doesn't stand in isolation. So VMware vSphere doesn't stand in isolation. And what do we mean by it doesn't stand in isolation is that VMware vSphere alone doesn't make a data center. There are lots of other surrounding technologies that we have to understand regarding the modern data center. So VMware vSphere is a data center technology. The most popular hypervisor in the data center, closely followed by the Microsoft Hyper-V. So it's the most popular hypervisor in data center, closely followed by Microsoft Hyper-V. And when we talk about hypervisor, we're talking about pulling together multiple physical servers to operate as a single entity. And there's a lot of benefits to that. So when we talk about hypervisor, we're talking about we're pulling multiple the resources, let me put that, of multiple physical servers from a single entity. So that's like the whole core basics of the VMware vSphere. Is you have a physical server, you have another physical server. You, rather than install an operating system on those physical servers, you install the VMware vSphere hypervisor on it, called ESXi, latest version 6, which is what this whole course is based on. You install that on it, it begins to manage the hardware, and then you can pull that together as basically like a pooled resource where you can use for provisioning whatever you need to provision. But as we mentioned, it doesn't stand in isolation. So whenever you're thinking VMware vSphere, you must be thinking about computing or compute. You must be thinking about storage. You must be thinking about networking, because VMware vSphere itself doesn't just stand alone. VMware vSphere alone doesn't make the data center. It needs a storage platform. It needs a networking platform for it to work properly. For you to work at all. Okay, so after talking about that, one of the things that I wanted to mention is around just because it's not just about just virtualizing infrastructure anymore. That was what it was about when VMware vSphere first came out. But it's not just about we're virtualizing infrastructures, we're installing hypervisors on physical servers anymore. It's way more than that now. There's like not the emergence, it's past emergence. There's like the common popularity of like cloud technologies in IT infrastructure. So we've got the public cloud, which are really popular, things like Amazon Web Services, AWS, and the Microsoft Azure services, which are really, really popular. So In the modern days, or if that's not the case currently in many data centers, where things are going or moving towards is where VMware isn't just performing like its old function, but it's performing more of like a function of making a data center into a private cloud. And then we'll talk about what we mean by that as we go. So, VMware's role, or VMware vSphere's role in the modern data center is mostly around the provisioning of private clouds. So not just about just virtualizing infrastructure, because it's gone beyond that now. It's now moved towards the place where now we're dealing with cloud, either publicly or privately. We're dealing with cloud technology, which is why one of the first things we're going to talk about are basics around cloud technologies. So let's put this one here. So basics of cloud technologies. And one of the first things that we're going to talk about around basics of cloud technologies, we're going to talk about the basics of the client server infrastructure. So, because typically in an organization, what you have is you have clients that need to access some sort of service. So, for example, you have mail services, mail servers providing the mail service, and clients need to access their emails, or they need to be able to send emails. So, client connects to servers to access services. You have file services. So people need to be able to store their files, access files that they're working together as a group. You have servers that provide the services. We have clients that have to be able to access the services. We have all different kinds of services, web services, intranet, all kinds of services out there. So one of the things when talking about client server architecture is that as we had more clients, typically we need, or we might need, additional servers or compute resources to handle that load. Otherwise, there's going to be a lag or timeout for clients. So what are we talking about? What we mean is we have a single server here providing services. So typically, we have this client trying to access services that this server provides. So what happens is at some point, most organizations plans to grow. At some point, you start getting more and more clients accessing the same services. And the resources on this server has a limit. In other words, it's not infinite. It has a limit on either the network resource, the storage resource, or the compute resource. So it's limited in the resources that it can provide, this server. So at some point, we must think about, so as we had more clients now, what happens is this server, either the storage or network on compute, begins to get overloaded, and then performance begins to slow down, or performance begins to take a hit. So what that means for us is that now we must figure out a quick way to be able to scale this server as easily as possible, usually without any downtime. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that because normally, like, the old way that VMware used to add relevance in the past is where it's about you have these physical servers that you can virtualize. Now what we're saying is it's not enough to just virtualize these physical servers now. What we must be able to do is, as we're virtualizing them, we must be able to manage them in such a way that as clients are accessing services on servers that are hosted on them, if there is a need to scale due to load, either scaling the network or scaling the storage or scaling this compute, we can scale it as easily and as quickly as possible without any downtime, which is one of the reasons why some of the things that we'll be focusing on in this course won't be focusing mainly or just around the things that VMware mentioned, in which, as I mentioned, in my opinion, many of them are outdated. We'll be focusing around things like resource management, the resource management of the vSphere of the vSphere platform. So we're focusing on things like that. We're focusing on things like the things that they brought up, things around odd plugging and or adding in terms of either compute or storage or network resources and all that stuff. So we'll be focusing around stuff like that because these are the basics, these are the building blocks of cloud technologies. You think about the popularity of Azure Web Services. One of the main popularity is you've got a web service in the cloud, Azure or on Amazon Web Services, also on Azure. So you've got a web service in the cloud, either Amazon or Azure. You have users accessing this web service, again, client-server architecture, clients accessing resources on servers. As clients begin to access these resources, it gets to a point like whenever or to give an illustration, I'm sure it's the same way all around the world. So in the UK we have like a weather service. So the weather service typically goes unused for a long amount of time. So like if there's if there's really nothing, it goes unused. Or let me know, maybe UK is not like the perfect example. Okay, yeah, let's use that. So it goes unused for like an amount of time, just very few people accessing it and using it. But then whenever there's like announcement on maybe there's going to be a storm, there's going to be an heavy rain somewhere, all of a sudden the scale, and I'm just making up numbers here, the scale could probably go from maybe 400 users a day to about 400,000 users within 1 hour. So how are you able to scale as quickly to match up to fit that service and also able to scale down whenever the service is not in use? These are like the basic building blocks of public cloud technologies. And what we're saying here is this is not just for public cloud technologies anymore. These are things that as we're building our VMware vSphere infrastructure, we must be working towards replicating this type of flexibility, this type of agility in our private data centers also. Because it's not enough just for this to be in the public cloud, this capacity or this available. Well, maybe you won't have the same capacity, but what I mean is that this ability to do stuff like this, it's not enough just for that to be in the public cloud. You must be able to provision that kind of ability in your private cloud also. So those are the kind of things that we're looking towards. So any question regarding that at all? Any questions or any comments, any suggestions, anything you want to add that we missed out? Abdul and Benji, anything?
I think you are saying about automating building VMware infrastructure.
Yeah, so we'll get to automation. So automation is also part of this. It's also part of the things that we'll need to. So as we're doing the study, it's part of the things that we'll need to be focusing on. Automation is also part of it. But this is not just like, this is even not just the automation part yet. This is about the ability to scale. And we're talking about the ability to scale easily. And then, so the ability to scale up and also the ability to scale down. So scale down when it's not in use, like the one I mentioned. Yeah, I read about DRDS and SDRS, done the balancing the demo period. I understand the blade provisioning and peak rebooting. So yeah, so so these are kind of like the things that in the past in like this kind of curriculum, it's not been focused on, because the main focus was around with virtualizing physical servers. But these are the kind of things that Okay, so let me give you an illustration. So let's say Abdul, for example. So let's say you're running for some reason. Let's say you're running a Microsoft VPN server. Let's say for some reason you're running, or even actually there's a better reason. So Microsoft has this server technology called Microsoft Direct Access, which is for people that are working remotely, being able to connect seamlessly into the office. Now, I'm sure whenever there's like nothing going on, people are able to come into the office, that's all right. That server is most likely not in use. If everything is going on all right, people are able to come into the office. It's probably very well less used. So at that point, being able to, so one of the things you can do in public clouds is you can say, so this server is very well less used. So maybe the server is just running on one CPU, and the server is running on maybe 4 gig of RAM. Just running on that slowly in the background. But then there's a weather condition in the country or in the city. People are not able to come into the office, and then all of a sudden the resources could go to, so depending on the size of organization, let's say it's like typically about 20 users trying to access your organization via direct access per hour. But then there's a weather condition that makes people not be able to come into the office. All of a sudden, this can go from 20 users per hour, depending on the size of your organizations, to about 1,000 users per hour. It's the ability to be able to automatically make a configuration where, as long as this machine is 20 users per hour and it's really slow, it's only got 1 gig and 1 CPU and 4 gig of RAM. But once the utilization begins to grow, same as the resources that are assigned to the machine begins to grow to match the utilization level. And this is not just over provisioning. So we'll get to that also in a bit, but just to drop that there. So any questions again related? I'm not sure, Abdul or Benji, is that confusing? Is that clear at all? Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's move on. And one of the ways, so when you're talking about this, is there are two ways to do this. So you can either scale out. So that's one way to do it, or you can scale up. And does anyone want to tell what it is? So whenever you have situations like this where servers can power down VMs, exactly. That's absolutely part of the thing. Exactly, Benji. So those are the kind of technologies. Like that's why we're focusing. We're going to be focusing heavily. So we're not going to be focusing on this is how you click this and provision this VM. That's like for the 19 in year 2000 that was relevant. In this day and age, that's something everybody grew up with. Everybody knows how to provision a VM. You can take an IT administrator who has never used VMware before, put him in front of the vSphere client, and they will figure out within minutes how to provision VM. So we're not going to be focusing on all those things because if you look at the curriculum of VMware with regards to this VCP course, I was disappointed. I'm sure most people will be disappointed talking about using the vSphere client. You're not talking to babies anymore. These are people that grew up with VirtualBox. These are people that grew up with VMware Workstation, people that grew up with Hyper-V and all kinds of virtualization technologies. So you can't be teaching them like all those pretty basic stuff. So the things we're focusing on are things like the ones that Benji mentioned, things like resource management, distributed resource management, distributed storage management, distributed power management, stuff like that, because that is what is relevant in IT today. It's bringing the same capabilities of the public cloud, bringing that into your private cloud. And whenever you're designing any VMware infrastructure, you're not just thinking in your mind, I'm virtualizing servers. You're thinking in your mind, I'm provisioning a private cloud. That's the mindset, is private cloud provisioning. It's not the mindset of virtualization. It's not the mindset of I'm just virtualizing servers. It's the mindset of I'm provisioning abilities to be able to achieve same or similar things that you can achieve on Azure and AWS, ability to achieve that in-house within my own organization. That is what the goal is of what we're trying to provision in the modern data center. Okay, so there are two ways whenever we talk about client-server architecture or infrastructure, you can either scale up or scale out. Does anyone know what the difference is between scaling out or scaling up? Abdul, you want to go for that? Or Benji? So, difference between scaling up and scaling out. Any ideas, any thoughts? Oh, can you still hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So does anyone know what the difference is between, so we said there are two ways that you can achieve this. So we've got, so in terms of being able to scale up and scale down easily, if the amount of clients accessing the service, if it increases, there are two ways that you can achieve this ability to scale up and scale down easily. And there's scale out, and so let's see. So scale up, add more CPU RAM, scale out, add more VMs. That's basically it. Benji. So you are right. So scale up is whenever a single request demands more memory or more processing power to complete, then you add more memory to the server or add more processing power to the server. So which is the scale up. It's you're basically just adding more resources to a single server. But scale out is you're adding more servers, to provide the service. So adding more servers to provide the service. So in this case, you're just adding more resources to the servers. In this case, you're adding more servers to the service. Well, so another question that I want to ask is, why would you scale out rather than use scale up? Why would you use scale up? Why would you use scale out? What's the reason? Benji said licensing. Well, that's one reason, but it's actually way much more than that. Because this will get us thinking in depth about the whole basis of computing. So it actually, so you're in the right. So licensing maybe, yeah, but there's actually much more. There's actually like a technical reason.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you.
Scale out, maybe you can move a resource from one VM to another one, or like you reduce the RAM from one virtual machine.
Yeah, okay.
Can
Think,
you do that?
yeah, you can, but think about this. This
But
actually,
you cannot scale, in this case, you cannot scale out unless the VM is off.
no, not really. So, okay, let's bring this one up. So, you've got this VM, right? It's got compute, right? It's got compute, it's got storage, it's got network, right? And it's got network. Okay. So it says each OS is 1 GB RAM. Yeah. So think about this. Okay. So whenever the bottleneck, so because when we're talking about clients accessing this server, and we say all of a sudden there's a lag, it's because there's a bottleneck somewhere, right? So you go, let's copy this and make multiple copies of this. So we have multiple clients all of a sudden accessing this server at once, something that wasn't happening before. So you've got multiple servers. So let's say typically whenever this server is in use, you only have let's say you only have 1, 2, 3 users using it typically. But all of a sudden, during every period, it goes from 3 users to 3,000 users. Okay, so so it depends on what the bottleneck is. So if the bottleneck is network latency, so in other words, this thing, let's say, as a port, let's go. So this thing, let's say it has a port, and the port is capable of 1 GB. And it's the fact that, let's say this is a file server, and it's the fact that there's latency on the network side where multiple people are trying to access resources over this 1 GB network port. So the CPU is okay. Think about that. So the CPU can process way much more than that. The storage is capable of that IO, or in terms of IOPS, but in terms of like the transfer that they can make over the network, they are limited in that way. In this case, the better solution may be to scale out, which will mean you add more physical servers that can provide the same service, so that all these machines don't have to go to this one. They can go over, to use this one. So you distribute the service. So that way you take away the network latency. Or another one is if the bottleneck is the storage. Yeah, if the bottleneck is the storage, you can either try to add more IOPS, maybe more disks for more IOPS and stuff like that, or you can just scale out to a different server that has a different storage pool, so that they can use this. But whereas usually if the issue is just with compute, where a process of the machine is trying to complete, or a client is trying to complete a process on a machine. Okay, a client is trying to complete a process on a machine, and then that process is using up the compute resource of the machine. Usually, you can just scale up the machine. Yeah, I'm not sure. Does that answer? Does that help at all? Is that clear? Is that clear at all? Okay, yeah. So in other words, scale up is this, to make it more simple. Scale up, when a single request, I intentionally highlighted single requests. So in other words, it's not just like the amount of clients that are coming. So one single request, even if this machine is used by just one client, when a single request okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, no problems. Okay, when a single request demands more, okay, let's take away the highlight now. Demands more memory, yeah, and processing power, to complete. So in this case, you just scale up. So one single request needs more memory and processing power to complete. But in the case of scale out is when the server itself is overwhelmed with multiple requests. In other words, this is just not an issue with a single request. This is an issue with multiple requests. So scale out, talking about multiple requests. Is that clear at all? So for example, you look on the server and then you look at the compute, you look at resource monitor, and you notice, oh, hold on, this is just a single request being processed from a single client, and it's already using 20% of CPU or 20% of RAM. So a single request. So in that case, people will just usually just scale up, add more memory, add more processing power to the machine. But scale out, it's, oh, okay, hold on, this machine is getting overloaded. So in that case, we need to quickly spin up other VMs that can provide the same service and distribute the service. And the whole point, you may be thinking, what's the whole point of talking about this in VMware? The whole point is these are the kind of services we'll be providing whenever we're thinking about using vSphere in a private cloud. And that should be our mindset. We're trying to provide the same ability of what you can do in the public cloud, make that available in our private data centers. So In other words, what we're talking about is we're not just talking about the ability in vSphere now. We're not just talking about the ability to do hot-add or hot plug CPU or hot-add memory or hot-add storage. We're talking about the ability to quickly provision VMs on the fly. So in other words, to provision VMs for a distributed service on the fly. We're talking about this ability, and these are the kind of things again that we'll be covering, and that's why majority of our focus. So in bringing this up, let's go back. Majority of our focus will be things around performance management in VMware or in vSphere. Talking about things like resource management and details in VMware vSphere. We're talking about, so those are the kind of things that we'll be focusing on. Focusing on things like not just virtual machine management. We'll be talking about the higher features of VMware, the things like the Benji brought up, things like SDRS and DRS and stuff like. So we'll be focusing on all those stuff, and that's the reason. So after we've dealt with that, let's move forward a little bit more in terms of what we're trying to achieve in our VMware vSphere studies. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is, let's talk about even VMware vSphere itself. So having had that mindset that what we're trying to achieve is provision private cloud. We're not just virtualizing servers. That is too basic. That is old school stuff. So we're not just virtualizing servers, we're provisioning private cloud. With that understanding now, we can now approach vSphere. So knowing that as we're approaching vSphere, we're approaching it with the right philosophy of what we're trying to achieve. So one of the first things that we're going to mention is we're going to mention, we've already mentioned VMware vSphere is a data center technology. We've mentioned that it is not in isolation. VMware vSphere fits into a whole picture of the data center. So so VMware vSphere doesn't stand in isolation. In your VMware vSphere, you've got your ESXi host. It's definitely connecting somehow to a network resource. At some point, it's definitely accessing, depending on how you've deployed it, accessing some form of shared storage somehow. It's accessing some form of shared storage somehow. And at the same time, it's protected by a security resource, like a firewall. And at the same time, that's connecting over to your router that goes out either to a leased line or to a public line, internet line, to maybe another data center around the world, where it's going to be doing its replication and disaster recovery, so that if this old data center were to go down, if something were to happen to this old data center and it were to go down, your services are still protected. So those are the kind of things we'll be talking about. So in terms of in terms of this, we can say that VMware vSphere is not in isolation. So just focusing on this alone, just focusing on this one alone, because this is what this course is about. Your ESXi hosts. That doesn't mean that we should forget about the rest of the data center. Again, always bear in mind the core principles. VMware vSphere is a data center technologies. It's not in isolation in data center. There's lots more components of the data center that we have to at least be aware of. So we don't have to be experts in all of them, but at least we have to be aware of them. And also, we're approaching this study with the understanding that what we're trying to do in the big world is the modern data center. What we're trying to do is we're not just trying to virtualize servers. We're trying to provision private clouds. So having all this background philosophy and understanding, we can approach vSphere in a proper way. So whenever we're approaching it, we know what we're trying to get out of this. We know the understanding, we know what we want to achieve from this. So, good. Any questions so far? Abdul, Benji, and welcome, Jesus, and Shazza. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
No problems here.
Thank you.
Nice to have you around. We've covered the beat more. We've covered the beat like before you guys joined and before Jesus joined also. So we've covered a
Okay.
bit around just a quick overview of what we've discussed. VMware vSphere is not in isolation. In data center, there's a lot more
Okay.
stuff that we have to understand in terms of data center. There's not just VMware vSphere, there's the storage, there's the network, there's the security, there's the routing, there's the moving all over to a remote data center. Most commonly, even like in the modern data center, it may not even just be another data center somewhere. It could just be a public cloud that you use for disaster recovery, which is again where our focus is cloud technologies, not just VMware vSphere, which is where things like the hybrid cloud comes in. So we must be learning as we're approaching these studies, we must be learning how does VMware vSphere, how does it integrate with all these public clouds like the Amazon Web Services or with Microsoft Azure or with the Google Cloud? How does VMware vSphere within my own data center, how does it integrate with all this? Because you may end up using them because they are way much more cheaper as your disaster recovery sites. Okay, so
By the way, that
Yeah.
Medium and HCCM course in Riyadh.
okay, nice. Was it helpful? That's really nice. Really nice that you watched that. Yeah. So Abdul also.
Same here.
Yeah. Abdul also like is one of the people that we study together. Okay, so let's move on now. So VMware vSphere, now we can approach VMware vSphere and learn about it. So VMware vSphere, they have VMware has multiple technologies available to help us in the provisioning of our private cloud. So they have multiple products that comes together. So one of the first thing that we should talk about is we should talk about vSphere, the features and the editions. So VMware editions actually. Let's just talk about the VMware vSphere editions. Oh, what's happened to my mouse? vSphere editions and features. So let's just talk about that. So anyone knows what the different editions. So you go out there, you say, okay, now I'm finally ready to start building my data center. I know I need an ESXi host that's going to host my virtual machines. Now you go out to VMware. VMware is going to tell you, yeah, you're right. We do make a product for that, but which one do you want? Which one of we make different products for that? Which one of the products do you want to be able to install? So who wants to help us with this? So what are the different vSphere editions that are available to us? Anyone? Oh, no problems, Benji. Yeah, okay. So yeah, anyone want to help with vSphere editions? What are the different vSphere editions that we have? Let me help you with the first one. So we have standard. What else? So you go to VMware vSphere, they're going to tell you, you go to VMware, I want to buy, VMware vSphere. Tell us what edition you want. We have the standard edition. What other editions do they have? Anyone wants to give any thought? Jesus, you want to anything?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
come on.
The first edition is the data center, VMware Standard Edition. The second one is the Enterprise Edition,
Excellent.
and one we have advanced, but I think so. It was finished in VMware vSphere in the 5. I think so,
Yep.
as per my knowledge.
Yep. So what's
Advanced is
the?
not available. Just only we have a 2 edition. That's it.
Oh, you think it's only just 2 editions that we have now?
Yeah.
There's actually like 3 main editions. So if we go, let's go to Google. Let's go to Google and let's go VMware vSphere. I think we still have the Enterprise Plus. VMware vSphere editions. We still have the Enterprise Plus. if I'm right. Yeah,
Oh,
we
yes.
still do. So we have VMware vSphere. So we have the standard, and then we have the enterprise. So I can't see the enterprise here. Oh, so it seems as if it's just VMware vSphere standard, VMware vSphere Enterprise Plus, and then this one. So have they retired the VMware vSphere Enterprise then? So because if this is just VMware vSphere, there we go. Yeah, so we're still talking about these other ones, but standard, yeah, standard enterprise plus, yeah. So so the last study I did, they still had enterprise and enterprise plus, but I'm thinking why on their website I can't see enterprise here. I can only see enterprise plus. So let's see. So we have we have standard enterprise plus. I'm not sure why that is, but the last study I definitely did, they definitely still have VMware vSphere enterprise and enterprise plus. Okay, so yeah, I mean let's go ahead with that. So it's standard enterprise plus. Yeah, that's it. Look at that. But this one is a screenshot
Yes,
from
sir.
2015. And yeah, this is interesting. You know what? So do you think they've revised their licensing? Because this is a feature from 2016, and their website now doesn't show enterprise anymore, because this is a screenshot of their website from 2015 when they released vSphere
Mm-hmm.
6. So they have standard enterprise plus, but now look at their website now. They only have standard and enterprise plus. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. Maybe they got rid of enterprise. Okay, so so let's move on to see. So yeah, so you go to VMware vSphere. Let's assume that the information we had, like as at 2 days ago, was still correct. We have enterprise and enterprise plus. And the thing to understand with these different editions is the main differences between them is in their functionality, the amount of features or the different features that you can use. So there are features that are available in standard, but there are features that are available in enterprise that you cannot use in standard. But there are also features that are available in enterprise plus, so that are not available in enterprise and standard. So that's one thing to note. And the reason why it is important is before you even talk about purchasing VMware vSphere, you have to go through the features and look at which features that you want. So that is very important, because otherwise you may go to buy standard and realize that some of the features that you need to provision your private cloud are only available in Enterprise Plus. In which case you need to you've bought standard now you need to go buy Enterprise Plus. So again, first thing is understanding the features that are available in which edition. And here's one other thing. VMware has another product called the vCenter server. vCenter server is a server that provides management. So in other words, you buy, in this case now, let's go back. You have an ESXi host. You have another, let's say you have two ESXi hosts now. So you have two of them now in your data center. So the thing that happens is now you have to manage them. So you don't want to be managing this one separately and managing this one separately. So what you typically do is you buy this other product called the VMware vCenter server, which is a standalone product. So whenever you buy ESXi Standard Enterprise Plus, it doesn't include vCenter. vCenter is a standalone product by itself. So then you buy the VMware vCenter, and then you can use it to manage the ESXi, this ESXi host and this ESXi host. But here's the thing is that if you buy the Enterprise Plus features, there are some features that you can't use except you're managing with vCenter. And it's the same as this one. So, and it's the same as standard and enterprise features. So even though you've bought Enterprise Plus, does not mean you can use all the features that are available. Even though you have Enterprise Plus, you may still need, actually, you will still need to buy VMware vCenter standalone to be able to use some of the features that you've paid for in Enterprise Plus. So keep that in mind whenever you were thinking about that. So let's go a bit deeper. Let's go a bit deeper in terms of the features that are available, and let's try to understand them more. So we won't go in depth because the rest of this curriculum is about going in depth. But the the main thing now is about just getting a brief overview of what the features mean, so that at least we know whenever we're going to buy, what are we looking for. Okay, so let's start with the very first one talked about down here. And here's the other thing that to mention is that the licensing is per CPU, not per CPU core, but per CPU. What does that mean? So that means if I have, again, back to our data center picture, let's say this physical server that I've got here is got 2 CPUs. Which many servers though? They have, let's say, maybe it's got, okay, let's say that one has 4 CPUs, this one has 2 CPUs. Again, not CPU cores, just CPU. So again, you go to Dell and just say Dell servers, whatever, then look for like maybe like the spec on one of Dell servers, anything. Let's pick anyone. Yeah, anything. Let's just pick anyone and then look, and then we'll see the number of CPU it has. So let's say we want to buy this one, for example. Dell PowerEdge out 2020. Let's go look at the specs of that server. So then you see the amount of CPU that it has. So because you're going to be paying for your licensing based on the amount of CPU that the server has. So that means if your server has 2 CPUs, you have to buy 2 vSphere standard licenses. If your server has 4 CPUs, you have to buy 4 vSphere standard licenses. So overview, one more details, so we'll not, okay, tech specs. Let's go down, down, down. Intel chipset, power chassis, where's the CPU? CPU, where you? Okay, processor. Yeah, did they mention the number of processors? I think that's because you can pick like the number of processors that you want. But going back up here, if you see, so you have the entry level servers, the advanced level servers, and the number of CPUs, so you can have sockets. So that's what you're paying for. So advanced we have like 2 sockets. This one will have 2 to 4 sockets. So if you buy a server that has 4 sockets in it, whenever you go to VMware to purchase the license, what you're going to be paying for is you're going to be paying for 4. So if you're going to be buying standard, you're going to be buying 4 VMware vSphere standard license because you're paying for it per CPU. If you're going to be buying Enterprise Plus, you're going to be buying 4 Enterprise Plus licenses because you're paying for it per CPU. So, and you can see here, vCenter server sold separately, and vCenter server standard, and that's sold separately. But again, remember, if you buy Enterprise Plus and then you don't buy vCenter Server Standard, there's some features that you have here that you won't be able to use except you manage it with vCenter Server. So be aware of that. Even though you've bought Enterprise Plus, that gives you capabilities to use some features, you may not be able to use them till you go ahead and buy this one. And you're paying for them per CPU. So any questions regarding that before we go forward and start talking about the features? And then we'll call it a day. So any questions regarding that or regarding what we've mentioned? So it really, yeah, carry on.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding the CPU licensing, that means we will be count the socket of the server.
Yes.
Like what we have 4 sockets. That means we have 4 CPUs. That means we will be buy 4 license per server, right?
Yes, that is right. So it's gonna be
okay, correct.
Yeah, it's gonna be per CPU. So if you have one server that has 4 sockets in it, you're gonna be buying, and you want to use vSphere standard, you're gonna be buying 4 vSphere standard licenses for that one server. You have another server that has 2 CPUs, you're going to be buying 2 vSphere standard licenses for that server. But on top of that, vCenter standard is just a one-time purchase. So this one, you just go buy it to be able to manage anything. So this one is not a CPU or
Excuse
anything.
me, sir.
Yeah, no problems.
For
Carry on, please.
for the vCenter server, let's suppose I have a vCenter server. I have one blade server.
Yep.
That blade server have a 4 sockets. Okay,
Yes.
it's a full height blade server.
Yeah.
And have a 4 sockets. So I wanna be install vCenter server in this blade server. So I will be buy 4 CPU license for the vCenter server.
Not for the vCenter server. So vCenter server, it doesn't matter which CPU or anything. It's just a single purchase. So the way you buy vCenter server is the same way you buy things like Microsoft Office. You just buy the software. You don't care about the number of CPUs or anything. The only thing that is bound by CPUs are the hypervisors themselves, which is the vSphere standard, vSphere Enterprise, or vSphere Enterprise Plus. Those are the only things that you have to be concerned about CPUs. With vCenter server, you don't need to care about CPU. You just need to buy it one time and forget about it.
Got it, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
No problem. Absolutely. And stop calling me sir. It's really strange. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through the feature. So at least we have an understanding. And look at here. VMware even helps us with this explanation. So let's go to the features, and because this is where we'll stop for today. We've gone for a long time already. Okay, yeah. Benji said it's like buying an Active Directory. Is that your son typing, or is that you, Benji? Because I can see some characters there. I have no idea what they mean. No, God food on laptop. Sorry about that. Yeah, because that no problems. Yeah, and even Mike, yeah, the complication is more around Microsoft stuff. Yeah, no problems, man. No problems, Benji. Okay, so let's go through this feature set. So number one, you have this feature here called vMotion.
Okay.
That they've called vMotion. Now this is available in standard. So everything that's available in standard is available in Enterprise Plus. So we can forget about, like, if it's available in standard, we can forget about the other ones. So we'll talk about this one maybe at the end. This other licensing option that they have, because this one, what they're saying is, we'll sell you vSphere Enterprise Plus, but we'll also sell you some of our other products on top of that. So they've got vSphere Operations Management, which is other products apart from Enterprise Plus. So you get Enterprise Plus plus other products. Okay, so vMotion. So does anyone know what vMotion is, what it does? Let's just give a brief description of what it is, what it does, and then we can move on. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, anyone wants to go for that? You want to go for VMware vMotion?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My company,
Yeah.
basically, I have 2 clusters.
Yep.
In one cluster, I have a total 12 servers. It's a blade servers. Basically, we have a C7000 series enclosure. In this enclosure, we have a total 16 blade servers.
Yeah.
And other enclosure, I have C7000, and in this enclosures, I have a 6 blade server. It's a full height blade servers.
Yep.
And I have a 2 cluster server. I have 2 clusters, cluster 1 and cluster 2.
Yep.
Like I am using vMotion option is there. Like let's suppose if I have any problem with any ESXi server, any blade server, so I will be move my all servers to another ESXi server, so I can like get that vanish from this.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's it, sir.
Awesome. That is absolutely correct. So it's just the ability to, and if you can see, enables live migration of virtual machines between servers across virtual switches and vCenter servers. So this is really interesting, because in the past, you can't do vMotion in between, before vSphere 6, you can't do vMotion in between data centers, right? You can do you can do vMotion within servers that are within the same cluster, but not across data centers. But I think I've now not personally tested this, but we'll test this in the whole course. We'll test this. Is that you can now do vMotion across data centers also, because that's what this is talking about. Enables live migration of virtual machines between servers across virtual switches and vCenter servers. So that is interesting. So over long distances,
Okay.
yeah. So with that means
Sir,
if yeah, carry on.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, carry on, please. Yeah.
Okay, I have, let's suppose in one cluster I have 10 server, and second cluster I have 10 server.
Yep.
My virtual machine is in the one cluster, cluster one.
Mhm.
If can I move from cluster one to cluster two? Because now I just moving from cluster like only from ESXi server to ESXi.
Yep.
Can I move from one cluster to second cluster?
With vSphere 6, I think you can.
Okay.
So before vSphere 6, I don't think you can, but with vSphere 6, I think you can. So I think you can move across. Yeah. What was the question? So the question, Benji, is that you have two separate clusters, and you want to vMotion a virtual machine from one cluster to another. So you have DRS cluster, any whatever cluster that you've configured. It says have to be in maintenance mode. Yeah. So, but Benji, what about on vSphere 6? Have you tested it on vSphere 6? Because I think I read somewhere that you can now with vSphere 6. Oh, okay. So you just do 6. Oh, okay. So we'll go with Benji then. So Benji said you can, but you have to be in maintenance mode. In other words, you have to put the server in maintenance mode, which is basically you take it out of production. So yeah. So I thought because I know that you used to be able to do that even under 5 under 5.5, you used to be able to do that. But I thought one of the advantages of 6 is that you can now do that even across cluster and even across data centers. But I'll need to, I'm not sure. So I think for now, let's go with Benji's answer because Benji has actually tested vSphere 6. And Benji said, yes, you can, but you need to put it in maintenance mode. But I'll just try to dig up.
I understand, sir.
Yeah, I'll just try to dig up where I was reading, where it mentioned that you can now do that with vSphere 6. But yeah, I'll try to dig that up and stuff. So and you have to have so you have to have the same CPU if it's that's fine. But yeah, I'm not sure. So yeah, we'll go with Benji's answer now, but I'll look into that because I thought I read it in one documentation somewhere. So that's vMotion, ability to move a VMware server, even live migration, even when it's active. Says just to pull out from one cluster and move into another is the same, I guess. Yeah. So that could be So that I think I'll go with your answer for now. I'll go with your answer for now, Benji. But then I'll still go ahead and try to test it because I think I read somewhere, but not too sure. Okay. Next one is storage vMotion. Anyone wants to go for that again? So anyone? Abdul, you want to go for this time? Storage vMotion. What does that do? Again, it's just
Yes, sir. Storage vMotion. I'm using also storage vMotion. I have a 3-bar in my environment, and that 3 like we give different data store to the VMware vCenter server, and we have total 20 what it's called data store in the VMware in the vCenter server.
Yeah.
Let's suppose if my space is going to full from data store 1, so I will be move my VMs from data store 1 to data store 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And this kind of advantage we are getting from the storage for the remote storage, just like that, sir. I don't know much about the theory, but I know how to do it.
Yep, absolutely. I understand. That's absolutely correct. So in terms of this, what we're moving now is, in this case, we're not just moving a VM, which is just the processing and the CPU, the processing and the RAM. We're not just moving this one from this one to this one. What we're actually doing is the storage of the virtual machine. We're moving it from one data store, as you mentioned, to another data store. So data store could be on the same NAS or SAN, or could be on different one, as long as it's visible to the SXI host. You can move the storage in the background. Let's say you want to perform maintenance on this SAN or NAS here, and you can just move the storage over to this one, perform whatever maintenance you want to perform, move it back, perform maintenance on this one. So that's like just the same similar thing. Okay, so next one is what they call HA, high availability. Now this one is a bit confusing in terms of like the wording, but anyone wants to quickly give a brief description of HA? What does HA do? Abdul, you've been quiet.
High
Yeah.
availability.
Yeah, let's let Abdul answer. Let's let Abdul
Okay,
give this one a shot. Yeah, Abdul,
sure.
you want to try to answer this? HA, what does HA do?
High availability.
Yeah.
If you have two EXIs hosts and you have a cluster, you can um, move the machine between one host to another.
Yeah, so you're right in terms moving machine from one host to another, but in which situation will it happen?
If one of the EXI hosts is down or something.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the things is that it's basically vMotion, but vMotion that's triggered by the VMware infrastructure itself. Whereas this one is administrator managed. An administrator has to enable vMotion, even though other different technologies use vMotion in the background. Whereas this one is, you have a host here, it has a VM on it. It has a VM on it. Something happens, this host just abruptly goes off. vCenter detects that and just powers on this VM on this one. But that's the key point to understand, is that high availability is not true high availability, because what will happen is that the machine will go off, but only that it will be restarted on this machine. And then if you integrate it with VMware tools, it can actually go beyond this physical host that's powered off. It can actually be monitoring the operating system within this VM. And let's say this operating system were to have a blue screen, the host of vCenter won't receive a heartbeat from this operating system and will go, something is wrong with this operating system. Even though it's powered on, it's probably blue screen. So I will restart it on this other host. So that's what HA is. So it has to. So it's a restart, automated restart, but it's not something that is 100% available. So then the other one they call data protection. It says this one delivers storage efficient backups through patented marketing terms, patented variable length deduplication, rapid recovery, one optimized replication for DR, it's vSphere integration. So basically, it's VMware backup product. So if you're going to be using this, it's basically the equivalent of using something like Commvault or whichever one, Symantec, any popular, or Vim or whatever, popular backup technology. So VMware data protection, that's why it is. That's available in standard also. So then fault tolerance. So this one is important. So fault tolerance. So anyone wants to go for that. So what is fault tolerance? Fault tolerance. What is fault tolerance? Yeah, go for it, Shazad. Go for it, please. If you want to go for it. I can just quickly explain it. So fault tolerance is,
Yes.
yeah, carry on, please. Yeah.
Okay. So the fault tolerance is like if you have multiple ESXi hosts in clusters, when it will be anyone host, it will be goes down, so the VMs automatically will be moved to other ESXi server.
Yeah.
So like we can get fault tolerance by this feature.
So I mean, you are close, but one of the things that you mentioned that I'm thinking about is you mentioned automatically moved. Because fault tolerance is not just moving. Moving is VMware. So fault tolerance basically means you've got a virtual machine running on this host. You have the same virtual machine running on this host. So it's not moving. So this virtual machine exists on two hosts at the same time. And then these two hosts are in communication with one another using something called VMware lockstep technology, vLockstep. So in other words, they are detecting each other. Are you available? Are you okay? So both machines exist on this host at the same time. So they don't need to be moved. They exist on this host at the same time. If there were to be a break in communication between these two, this guy will go, okay, it seems as if this guy is dead. Therefore, what I'll do is I'll take over the work. And it's going to take over the work. And it's going to advertise to this switch and say, hey, this virtual machine is now here. And it's going to take over the work. And the same thing happens. This one is back online, this one. So they both virtual machines, the same virtual machine exists on more than one host at the same time. They are in communication with one another via something called vLockstep technology, which is to detect whether they are available or not. So if you just Google vLockstep, VMware vLockstep, so it's the one that's used in V and fault tolerance. So virtual machines are in communication with one another over vLockstep, and then if it detects that the other machine is not responding, it takes over and start responding to that request. So that is the VMware fault tolerance one. Okay, so let's accelerate here because of time. Next one, vShield endpoint. So this one is mainly you can have your antivirus product. So rather than your antivirus product running within each virtual machine, if you think about it, so you have this host here. So this host has multiple virtual machines on it. So you have multiple virtual machines on it. Multiple virtual machines running on this guy, on these guys. And then each of the virtual machines within them, they have antivirus software running. And if one thing you know about antivirus software is that they can be CPU intensive. So in other words, you have this antivirus product running within this. So sometimes, because sometimes the way antivirus products work is that if you try to access a file, it scans the file first. And if you think about the purpose of a server is to access services. So the more people are trying to access services, it's scanning everything except you make exclusions, scanning everything. And that can, if you're not careful, that can begin to use up almost all the resources on your ESXi host. Because majority of your resources could just be antivirus scanning going on, not actually the servers providing services, but just antivirus services going on. So what they've done is they've designed this thing called VMware vShield, where you can offload the job of the antivirus scanning away from the virtual machine to VMware vShield. And it's going to be scanning all the traffic at that point. It's not going to be scanning them on the VM. It's going to be scanning them on the host point. So is that clear at all? So basically, freeing the VMs from having to run extra processes of antivirus scanning, that process is offloaded to the host, and that will take that over for the all virtual machines on that host. So we will be demonstrating VMware vShield also in this course. So even though it's not supposed to be part of this course, we will be demonstrating it. So because that can save a lot of resources if it's implemented, CPU resources especially with antivirus. vSphere replication. So anyone wants to talk about it? Anyone wants to talk about this one? Anyone? And then we start getting to some of the ones that we mentioned around private cloud, which are the things I'll be focusing on. We start getting towards add, increases capacity by adding CPU, memory, or devices to virtual machines when needed without disruption and downtime. Aha! This is beginning to sound interesting. This is beginning to fall in line with the philosophy that we talked about. So because most of the things we've talked about up to this point has been mainly around virtualization technology. This is virtualizing servers. But now, add, we're beginning to talk about cloud. We're beginning to talk about the ability to scale up and scale out, on the fly quickly. So ability to increase capacity by adding CPU, memory, or devices to virtual machines when needed. Again, it's not something that you over provision. This is something that's only added when needed. And then without disruption and downtime. That is Azure AWS level. Okay, vSphere replication says enables efficient array agnostic replication of virtual machines data over. Does anyone want to explain this to us? Shazad, you've been very good at explaining to us. So do you want to explain this to us? vSphere replication, have you come across it before?
So vSphere application, just try to thinking where I get.
I'm just no idea.
I'm sorry, sir. You can explain, please.
No problems here. What about
No
Benji? What
ideas.
about Benji? Benji, do you have any ideas about this one? vSphere replication. Oh, and by the way, something I forgot to mention is that if you look at vSphere standard here, notice that fault tolerance, that is as long as you've only assigned 2 vCPUs to the machine. So in other words, if you have a virtual machine here that is in fault tolerance with this virtual machine, so basically the same virtual machine running on the same host using vlockstep to communicate with each other at the same time. If you're going to be using, if you're going to buy vSphere standard license, the maximum amount of CPU that you can give to this virtual machine is 2 vCPU. Same thing with this guy. The maximum amount is 2 vCPU that you can give to this guy here. If you give more than 2 CPU, you have to buy the Enterprise Plus. And the reason for that is really important. It's a ploy by VMware, because most likely any application that is so important that you're trying to protect in this way, in other words, you're running the same virtual machine on 2 hosts or more than 2 hosts at the same time, that application must be really important. And if it's really important, most likely it's highly utilized. So most likely, which means for many people, you may have to assign more than 2 vCPUs to it. So in other words, if you're going to assign more than 2 vCPUs, get ready to pay for Enterprise Plus, because standard only gives you fault tolerance as long as, so before, fault tolerance wasn't in standard at all in previous licenses, but now in version 6, there's fault tolerance in standard now, but only up to 2 vCPUs. So just be aware of that. Okay, now replication. I think we may need to open this one to read it. VMWavre replication is a hypervisor-based asynchronous replication solution for vSphere virtual machine. So I'm thinking, yeah, so this is basically something called DSRM. No, is it DSRM? Distributed Services Resource Manager. No, not that one. VMware Site. So it used to be called VMware Site Recovery Manager. In other words, where you can replicate your whole vSphere infrastructure, your whole vCenter infrastructure, you can replicate that over to a different site. So in that way, you have to set up something called, so it used to be called VMware Site Recovery Manager in version 5, but now it's just called vSphere Replication. And again, this is some of the things that we in the area that we talked about in terms of hybrid cloud where it comes in. Because in many cases, this will not just be a site, this will not just be another data center. In many cases, because these are cheaper now, he said, yeah, we use Vim for this versus Vim versus Net. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what happened was that I think this used to be a separate product in the past. Now I'm not too sure about this, so don't take my word for it. But if vSphere replication is the same as Site Recovery Manager, vSphere Site Recovery Manager versus vSphere replication, if it's the same, so it used to be Site Recovery Manager in version 5, but I think it's now different in version 6. So if it's the same, this doesn't exist as part of the licensing before. This is something new in this license. So it used to be a separate license. No problems, Benji. So it's all right. So this used to be a separate license before. But again, looking at this one, it looks to be the same one that I know as vSphere Site Recovery Manager, because I remember doing a demo on this, and it's basically you're replicating. So just think about, you have your vSphere infrastructure here, and basically you have a separate site where you have almost a similar setup as what you have here, reproduced in a separate site. Yeah. Control Z. And so you have this reproduced in a separate site. And what happens is that you have, as this one, as you're adding nodes to this, everything is replicated over to this side. So that if this data center were to go completely out, this data center is ready to take over that job. But again, this is like mainly for huge organizations that want to do something like that. For small organizations, we want to do something like what Benji mentioned, where you're using something like Vim to just replicate your VMs from the storage side over, or like in my own organization's case, something like NetApp to do something like that. Okay, let's go on with the features. Because this is really important, because once we now get the features, it makes it easier so we know which ones that we want to. So auth-add is also available in standard. Virtual volume, so these are part of the things that we'll be focusing on. The resource management features. So virtual volumes enables abstraction for external storage, SAN and NAS devices, making them VM aware. So I'm not too sure about this one. I think this is something that is new in vSphere 6. But I can have a quick look at my note here. Yeah, it's a new feature. So this is a new feature in vSphere 6. So it's something that we'll discuss later in the course, but I'm not so familiar with it. But it says, must be supported by your storage array, essentially provides virtualization aware storage. Instead of managing storage based on LAN, storage can be managed based on the VM. I like my note here. Look at my note. I like I like what I've put down in the notes. Look at this. So Vivo, look at that. I've put down in my notes. New feature that must be supported by your storage array. Essentially provide virtualization aware storage instead of managing storage based on LAN storage can be managed based on the VM, whatever that means. In other words, sometimes IT people will just explain stuff, we just make stuff complicated whenever we're explaining them. So this one, I will have more information when we start explaining it. So storage policy based management allows common management across storage tiers and dynamic storage class. Again, these are just terms that makes things confusing for people. Does anyone understand what they mean by this? This is not clear at all. Allows common management across storage tiers and dynamic storage class of service automation very policy driven plane. Let's see the picture, maybe it's going to help us. So this traditional storage, this is software defined storage, storage based policy management, VMFS. Oh, I see. Okay, just to explain, I understand this one because I've seen it before. So what this one means is that you can define storage policies. So in other words, I can go to my infrastructure here and I can define and say, you know what, this VM, I want it to be guaranteed 1,000 IOPS on this NAS. Now that's interesting because I'm defining that on vCenter. I'm saying I want this VM to be guaranteed 1,000 IOPS on this storage system. But as long as this system is aware of this protocol, vCenter can enforce that. That is why they said here, they said allows management control across storage tiers, dynamic storage class of service automation, very policy driven control. But the storage system must be aware of that to be able to use that. But that's basically what it means, is that you are able to basically configure something close to QoS for virtual machines from within vCenter. So you can say, I want this virtual machine to be guaranteed. You can configure a policy for storage and say, I want this virtual machine to be guaranteed this amount of IOPS or whatever, and vCenter will enforce that for you. Is that clear at all? Is that confusing? Is that confusing at all?
Yes, little bit.
Yeah. So let me bring up this one. So listen, look at this. This will help to make it maybe a bit clearer. So look at this. This is from my notes. Storage policy can be assigned. So you create a storage policy. For example, storage policy can mean this VM is guaranteed 1000 IOPS on my NetApp storage or whatever, NetApp EMC, Synology, whatever. So you create this policy and you assign this policy to this VM called domain controller 1. So you have this policy on vCenter, you assign it to domain controller 1. vSphere can then talk to the underlying storage. That is, it will talk to the NetApp storage through an API. In other words, the NetApp storage has to understand the language that vCenter is speaking. So in other words, this is not supported on all storage systems. You have to check if your storage system supports this. So it will now be assigned to that VM. So vSphere can then talk to the underlying storage through an API to understand the underlying capabilities and then ensure that VMs are only placed on storage that meet your requirement. Is that much clearer? Is that clearer at all? Or is that more confusing?
Yes, sir.
That's clearer, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, how about Abdul, is that clearer to you also? So in other words, you're just creating policy on vCenter. As long as your storage system supports this, you can apply that to a VM and vCenter will enforce that this VM, it meets this particular policy. But again, this is something that if we go back to this one, so you can see this is supported also on standard. Reliable memory, VMWavre reliable memory places critical vSphere components such as the hypervisor into memory regions identified as reliable and supported hardware. This is more of like a security feature. So I think I've read about this before, a lot before I did my own exam and stuff. So this is more of like a security feature where you're protecting vCenter, or sorry, you're protecting ESXi in the memory. So no problems, Abdul, no problems. Sorry. So VMware vSphere reliable memory places critical vSphere components such as the operation into memory region identified as reliable. So it's more of like a security feature. Big data extensions run Hadoop of vSphere to achieve higher utilization, reliability, and agility. So we can go through all this, but I've posted the link in the chat window so that we don't waste too much time. But I'll advise that before our next hangout on this, SIOC is a big thing. Storage IO control. Yep, that is right. So this one, storage DRS, storage IO control, network IO control. Oh, okay, but Benji is not able to talk. I wanted to say you should just give us a brief overview of what this is. But I think what we'll do is, because of time. So yeah, Benji really likes this one. He says prioritizes storage access by continuously monitoring IO load of the storage volume and dynamically allocating available resources to virtual machines according to business needs. So again, this sounds more like storage QoS. So moves all your VMs around cluster hosts, which I guess would be DRS. So DRS is the one that does that, Benji. It's the one that moves your VMs around. This one is about storage. So we'll move the storage of the VMs around, right? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So I'll post this in the chat window. I think what we should do is that we should just go through these features before the next hangout, then we can pick it up from there. So that next time we start, at least we have just a general overview of the features, and then we can move forward. So any questions regarding what we've talked about today, so that we don't go on and on and on? We've been on for like 1.5 hours already. Any questions at all? Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions? And then we call it a day now. Anything?
Okay. No, sir.
No, none?
Thank
okay.
you so much.
No problem. It's all right. Absolutely all right.
I want to be asked one thing.
Yeah, okay. Carry on, please.
Sir, this session, if we start tomorrow with the same, can you please give me the schedule? Because basically I'm from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Right now, in my side, the time is 12 p.m.
Wow.
Sorry, not 12 p.m. Sorry, 11:57 p.m. And it's going to 12 after 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So Can you please just share the schedule again, because I think so I was missed that schedule last time, because I want to join your class yesterday. I
Yeah.
cannot join the class.
Is this time comfortable for you, or is it not comfortable for you?
Yes.
It's comfortable for you this
Yes.
time. Okay, yeah. So the plan is to
Yes,
keep
sir.
doing it at this time every week. At least you will cover the vSphere.
Every week,
Yeah,
every week,
yeah. So every week. So weekly.
every
So
week. That means it's a 2-hour session, right? From 10 to 12 on my side.
yeah. So
Not
the week. So there are some weeks that we won't be able to do it, maybe due to we're busy or something like that. But everything will be on this page, on the community page. We'll post everything there. So if I go bring this one up on the community page, so everything that will be every single hangout on this community page, on the event. If I go back on the okay, this one, and then if we go on the group, and then if we go down here under event, you see all the events there. So it's going to be the same time. And if we won't be doing it, if we go back under all posts, I will be announcing it here to say we won't be doing it this week. And then, like, before the middle of the week, I will post the topic that we'll be discussing so that we can read ahead. So is that okay at all?
Sounds good, sir.
Yeah, okay, no problems. No problems, yeah. Okay, then if there are no other questions, then we'll call it a day, and then we'll see again next time. So just look out in the community page, look out for you'll get the invite, and then I'll post the topics also. Like this week, I've posted like the topics of what we've mentioned so far. So posted that there, and then we can pick it up from there. So I'll post the topics also. So the main idea is the entire VCP6 curriculum will cover it. At least 1 or 2 topics per week, so that we don't go too much. We just go 1 or 2 topics every week, and then cover the whole curriculum. Okay, no problems, man. So I'll catch up with you guys again next time. Have a wonderful week ahead. Speak to you later.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
sir.
very much. Yeah, no problems. Thanks very much. No problems, Ben. Thanks.